Along the ragged coast of antebellum Carolina, where tidal waters weave through reeds like silver threads, there stood a mansion older than any map drawn of the region. Travelers passing by riverboats swore they felt its presence before they even saw it. A place where the marsh hummed and the house listened. Locals called it Ironwood Rise, named for the line of ironwood trees that shaded its drive like a cathedral. But those forced to labor on the Ravenshaw rice marshes had another name for it, the Listening House. The story goes that its wooden frame soaked up secrets like rainwater, that its shutters creaked warnings, that if you spoke too boldly near its walls, the house would remember, and one day it would answer. Within that house lived the Ravenshaw family, once pillars of low-country aristocracy. Their wealth came from rice, indigo, and a history that stretched back to British loyalists who'd refused to leave after the Revolution. Their pride, however, was rotting at the roots, quietly, steadily, like wood left too long in brackish water. Yet the true heart of this story belongs not to the patriarch, nor to the overseers, nor even to the marshlands themselves, but to two young women whose lives were shaped by the expectations of a world they never chose. Evelyn Ravenshaw, the elder, delicate as porcelain, trained to keep her voice soft and her heart quieter still. Maria Ravenshaw, younger by a year, sharp as a blade, defiant in a world that demanded obedience. The sisters were raised like twin flames, kept under the eye of their strict aunt after their mother's mysterious death. They were the centerpieces of Ironwood Rise, the jewels, the ornaments, the heirs. But Ironwood Rise had a way of changing people, and when curiosity grew where silence had once lived, everything began to unravel. Before we dive into this chapter of forgotten history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another long-form story from the past. Because once we start this tale, there is no turning back. The year was 1848, a turning point in the American South. Railroads were beginning to carve through the wilderness. The Mexican-American War had ended. Talk of abolition was growing louder in the North, though in the South, such talk could cost a person everything. At Ironwood Rise, dawn painted the sky peach and gold. From their veranda, Evelyn and Maria watched the day begin. They weren't supposed to watch the workers. They were not to make eye contact. They were not to linger their thoughts, as their aunt put it, on those who live beyond the house's privileged walls. But rules often crumble when curiosity grows. Evelyn's book, an illustrated botanical volume, slipped from her fingers and fell over the railing. Before the butler could respond, a young man from the canal team stepped forward, picked it up, and held it gently as though the object belonged to a world far from his reach. Their eyes met, just for a breath, yet heavy enough to tilt the axis of everything that would follow. His name was Josiah Carter. He had once lived in Charleston, working as a carpenter and assistant to a minister who quietly taught literacy where it was forbidden. Josiah was intelligent, too intelligent, according to the authorities who had dragged him from the city and placed him on a rural plantation where they assumed his knowledge would fade like morning mist. But knowledge doesn't fade easily, and dignity, even under chains, does not break quietly. Maria saw the look shared between Evelyn and Josiah that morning, and something in her chest tightened. Not in jealousy, not yet, but in a recognition of something dangerous. The house felt it too. If you listened closely, you swear the old timbers groaned. Ironwood Rise prepared for its annual procession of parties, teas, and dinners. Officers on leave, merchants from Charleston, distant cousins with shining pocket watches, all arrived to admire the Ravenshaw daughters. Evelyn moved through these gatherings like drifting lace. Maria moved like a spark in the dark. Josiah served wine, carried trays, opened doors, always silent, always distant, always aware that one wrong glance could end him. But one evening changed everything. A harvest season prelude where the ladies wore silk and the men smoked sweet tobacco under the chandelier glow. Mariah brushed past Josiah in the candlelit parlor, a touch so fleeting it could have been accidental. Only Evelyn saw. Across the room, the sisters' eyes met, and for the first time in their lives, neither girl looked away. The fault line that had only cracked before now began to open. That night in their shared room, Evelyn finally spoke. "You touched him." Mariah did not deny it. She sat at her vanity, brushing her hair with measured strokes. "And he looked at you," she replied, "and I saw what it did to you." Their words were quiet, but what stood between them was not. Dark clouds bruised the horizon. Wind tore through. Rain hammered the marshes until water overflowed canals and turned the earth into angry rivers of mud. The sisters stood at the tall parlor window, side by side for the first time in days. Lightning ripped through the sky and lit the fields in flashes of ghostly white. Mariah's voice came soft. "Do you ever feel like this house is cursed?" Evelyn swallowed. "Cursed? Or cursed because of us?" Mariah didn't answer. She didn't need to. Both knew the truth. Both knew the same secret sat in their chest like a stone, though one wanted to fight it and the other wanted to feed it. Ironwood Rise listened. The old timbers creaked again. The listening house had begun to remember. After the storm, life resumed, but not as it had before. Mariah walked the grounds more frequently. Evelyn spent mornings at the piano, yet barely touched a key. Josiah carried out his tasks with an added air of tension. Rumors began to thicken like fog. Old Iris, the cook, who had lived through 5 generations of Ravenshaws, spoke in hushed tones. "That house knows something. I can feel it in the floorboards." The whispers eventually drifted to the overseer, Mr. Thatch, a man known for cruelty disguised under drawling politeness. Thatch was the kind of man who saw information as currency and misfortune as opportunity. He began watching Mariah more closely, watching Evelyn, watching Josiah most of all. One afternoon, Evelyn stood on the veranda, watching Josiah repair a broken cartwheel. Thatch approached her with a smile too thin to be sincere. "Your sister's been seen in interesting company." Evelyn's breath caught. Thatch leaned on the railing. "Just saying, people talk." Evelyn whispered, shaking, "You will not repeat this." Thatch's grin deepened. "I won't need to. The neighbors do enough talking for me." The house exhaled sharply. A window shutter slammed without wind. The listening house had heard everything. That night, Evelyn entered Mariah's room. Her sister sat in her nightgown by the open window, hair catching the moonlight. "That's right," Evelyn whispered. "He's watching you. Watching him." Mariah didn't flinch. "Let him." "You don't understand," Evelyn said. "He won't ruin you quietly. He'll drag Josiah down with you." Mariah turned, eyes blazing. "I won't apologize for wanting something true." The room grew colder. "You don't love him," Evelyn said softly. Mariah's chin lifted. "I might." Evelyn felt the floor tilt beneath her. Mariah had always chased danger, but this time, danger would chase back. Mariah visited the rice canals under flimsy excuses, to deliver water, to inspect the marsh pumps, to simply wander. Josiah avoided her as much as he dared. He knew where such encounters led. He'd seen consequences, scars on men's backs, names removed from records, bodies found in riverbeds. But Mariah's persistence disarmed him. One evening, Evelyn followed her sister along the canal path, keeping her distance behind a cluster of reeds. She saw the moment clearly. Mariah standing close, Josiah tense and whispering urgently, "You must stop this. You put us all in danger." "Then let the danger come," Mariah answered. When Evelyn stepped forward, gravel crunching beneath her shoes, both turned. Mariah's expression hardened. "You shouldn't spy." "I'm trying to save you," Evelyn cried. Mariah shook her head. "Save me? Or save yourself?" Josiah stepped back, voice low, pleading, "Someone will see." But someone had. The marsh may have been empty, But Ironwood Rise never was. Captain Alistair Ravenshaw, a man whose temper was legendary even in Charleston, was returning sooner than expected. Worse, he was bringing associates with him, men whose reputations were built on rigid social codes, men who viewed deviation as contamination, men who saw scandal as a sickness that must be burned out. Ironwood Rise braced itself. Aunt Helena scrambled to prepare the house. The servants moved faster. Thatch sharpened his eyes like knives. That night, Evelyn stood behind Mariah as she fixed her hair. "When father arrives," Evelyn whispered, "please, please stop seeing Josiah." Mariah met her reflection's gaze. "I can't promise that, because my heart isn't made for cages," Mariah murmured. Outside, thunder rolled across the distant coast. Inside, something darker rolled through the corridors. Captain Ravenshaw returned with a retinue of guests, officers, businessmen, and one Judge Kittrell, whose presence alone made the household nervous. Kittrell was known for two things: harsh rulings and brutal enforcement. He'd come to discuss land deals, marsh rights, and a rumored bankruptcy creeping up on the Ravenshaw estate. But he also came with ears sharp enough to hear scandal through walls. He noticed Josiah. Josiah with his shoulders square. Josiah educated. Josiah unbroken in posture. And Kittrell whispered to Captain Ravenshaw, "You have a problem here. A big one." Meanwhile, Evelyn tried desperately to cool her sister's recklessness. But Mariah had found a fire that warmed her too deeply. Ironwood Rise felt the tension. Servants spoke in hushed tones. Aunt Helena prayed louder in the mornings. And the house, the listening house, creaked at night as if turning in its sleep. One late afternoon, Evelyn found Josiah repairing the sluice gates that fed the rice paddies. The sun set behind them, casting a golden glow over the canal. She approached him carefully. "You don't understand how dangerous this is," she whispered. Josiah continued working, voice steady. "I never asked for this, never encouraged it." "But she cares," Evelyn said. "I don't want her hurt," Josiah replied softly. "Or you." "You will be killed," Evelyn whispered. "My father will not tolerate this. Kittrell won't either." Josiah met her gaze, calm, resigned. "Then tell her, Miss Evelyn. Then pray she listens." But she wouldn't. The grand harvest ball arrived, every lantern lit, every chandelier glowing. Mariah entered in a ruby gown that drew eyes like a magnet. Evelyn followed in soft blue, pale and distracted. Josiah served wine at the edges of the crowd, careful to avoid all unnecessary attention. But the eyes watching him that night were sharper than knives. When Mariah brushed his wrist as she passed in the hallway, Josiah froze. It should have been nothing, a passing moment, an accident. But Kittrell saw, Thatch saw, and Ironwood Rise, the house itself, felt the shift. The walls tensed, the floors held their breath. The listening house had reached its limit. Everything that followed unfolded like a trap snapping shut, and both of them knew it. After the guests departed, Captain Ravenshaw stormed through the corridors. He summoned Evelyn, Mariah, and Josiah, dragged in by Thatch. Judge Kittrell stood by the hearth, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with the promise of righteous violence. The captain's voice shook the room. "Tell me the truth, now." Mariah stepped forward first. Evelyn held her breath. Josiah's pulse pounded visibly at his throat. "Father," Mariah said, voice trembling but defiant, "I care for him." Silence fell so heavy it seemed to crush the air from the room. Then all hell broke loose. Accusations, threats. Aunt Helena is crying in the doorway. Thatch smirking. Kittrell is stepping forward with dark suggestions. The captain raised his hand. Whether to strike his daughter or condemn Josiah, no one would ever agree on afterward. And the listening house, that old, watchful house, groaned as though something inside it shattered. What happened next burned itself into local legend. Some stories claim a fire was started that night. Others say Josiah escaped with Mariah into the marsh, never to be found. Some say Evelyn collapsed on the stairs, her voice forever silenced. But all stories agree on one truth. Ironwood Rise broke that night. The Ravenshaw legacy unraveled, the listening house went quiet, and the marsh swallowed the secrets it was given. Ironwood Rise still stands today, half in ruin, half preserved by historians hungry for forgotten stories. Visitors say the house feels cold, even in summer. Some swear they hear footsteps in rooms left empty for a century. Others say whispers follow them down the halls. But the story of the Ravenshaw sisters and Josiah Carter is more than a ghost tale. Love punished, pride weaponized, and silence that destroys everything it touches. Before we close, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so stories like this one continue reaching the people who want to hear them.